to Transitional Justice on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today we'll talk about USAID from the ground up, the end of an era. Our guest for the show is Vy Lam, formerly with USAID. Welcome to the show, Vy.
Thank you, Jay. I'm happy to be here.
The end of USAID was the end of an era for the United States and its beneficiaries around the world. And we need to understand what happened, why it happened, what the experience was like for the USAID workers and beneficiaries, and what all that means for the United States going forward. So thanks for being here on the show, Vi. So you were the advisor on Indigenous Peoples as part of USAID's Inclusive Development Hub. What is that job?
Basically, the job is actually in response to a congressional mandate. And the mandate from Congress since 2012 has been for USAID to better improve our programming by expanding our efforts to include traditionally marginalized groups in our programming. And for my portfolio, that focuses on Indigenous peoples. And because of Indigenous peoples globally distinctive culture, language, and livelihoods, Congress really directed USAID to pay more attention to how we build trust and relationship and partnerships with Indigenous people so that we can best design programs to support development, support livelihoods in a way that's meaningful to them. As you know, globally, Indigenous people have experienced extensive oppression and neglect for taking over their land and their natural resources. So our mandate was to improve how we work with Indigenous people so that we design programs that are relevant to them.
So you joined USAID in 2012. That's 13 years ago, roughly. Why? Why did you had come to USAID with a Ph.D. in biotech from the University of Wisconsin at Madison? Why did you come to USAID, and what did that degree mean? It's always nice to have a PhD, but what did that degree mean for you?
Thank you. It was a fortunate affairs, actually. When my family moved to Washington, D.C., I just followed the flow. You know, when you're in D.C., you work for the federal government. So I started applying for jobs, and I fortunately got connected to the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences. They had a science and technology policy fellowship program, which worked to bring scientists such as myself into federal government agencies to strengthen the integration of scientific information and data into the evidence base that informs US government policies. And the way that it worked was that we interviewed with different government agencies to see what our interests were and how their interests were and how the two connected. And it was really by chance that I was connected to USAID's Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance portfolio at the time. So I had the fortunate opportunity to join USAID to support their monitoring of global human rights issues and good governance and democracy and support our programming toward those goals. And it's through that effort that I started working on supporting USAID's integration of marginalized groups into our programming.
So how was it going for you? 13 years is a big chunk of your life, actually. How was it going over that time? How was it going for you? Were you happy with it? Were you gratified in what your work was? Were you gratified in what your work was? Were your supervisors gratified in your work too? What was the experience like for that 13 years?
I don't want to speak for my supervisors, but the fellowship program that I joined is an annual program. So every year it will have to be reviewed and renewed by USAID. And so for the last 13 years, um, at any time, if USAID was not happy with my performance, they simply did not need to sign the paperwork to renew my contract from year to year. So I take that as a good indication that I was doing a good job and that colleagues, particularly agency leadership saw the value of my work and chose to keep me around. So it wasn't a career-based job, so to speak. It was really a year-to-year job that I may not end up having for the next year.
All things being equal, if these contracts would have kept on coming for you year by year on into the future, would you have stayed with USAID? Was it the kind of job that you liked so well that you would keep on renewing?
Oh, definitely. I think that based on your previous shows, you well know the historic atrocities against global indigenous peoples. And they have faced extensive human rights violations. They have faced extensive neglect. And only in the last couple decades that they have started to make waves in advocating for their own rights at the UN level, at the US level, and globally. And through the last 7 years or so, I have been very proud to have supported USAID to develop and launch our policy on promoting the rights of indigenous peoples. And it's through that and my collaboration with my colleagues across the agency, which implements development programs across essentially all development sectors, including health, education, advocacy, governance, infrastructure, energy. It's through my collaboration with other colleagues at USAID that we slowly bring in indigenous leaders and essentially support them in their advocacy for their own rights and their advocacy for their own vision for what development means to them and their communities. So I'm very proud and happy that I've had the opportunity to support many global indigenous organizations and leaders to participate in platforms and negotiations that they wouldn't otherwise never have had access to. And that's a very important effort that I miss the most because, particularly, the efforts that I was envisioning for the Asia Pacific, working with the Pacific Islanders, we were just ready to launch a new effort for the Pacific Islands when the shutdown came around.
Did your beneficiaries, I guess that I call them beneficiaries, but whatever term you want to use, were your beneficiaries appreciative? Did they appreciate the work and the contribution you made to their society and to them individually? Did they express that appreciation?
Yes, they did. And I would say that they are not beneficiaries, but as much as equal partners. And that's a very important distinction because within the global framework for indigenous peoples' rights, of the topmost importance is their rights to free, prior, and informed consent, which means that they should be informed and freely have the ability to decide if they collaborate with us or not. And in doing so, we supported USA programs to dedicate resources and time to engage, build trust and relationship with our partners on the ground. And through that, better understand their context, the limitations that they want to tackle, and that what are the support systems that they have identified they need that USAID can best help with. One of them, and just to give you a sense as to the scope of this, one of the more recent activity that we did in Honduras was to support the indigenous Honduras Lenca women to put together an event that they themselves have designed, that they have produced the food themselves and formulated the discussion points and was successful at inviting representatives from the government and from the different bilateral actors within the country, including representatives from USAID, through which they can best express their vision for their family, their community. And, by all feedback that I've received, everybody was very happy with the outcome. And USA colleagues share with me that they can tell how proud the women were that for the first time ever, they've had the opportunity to design an agenda through which they could engage with government officials, through which they can engage with representatives from USAID and the US Embassy and other bilateral donors so that they can better express what their challenges are, what their visions are, and how we can help them. And that's an important point because for Indigenous peoples, they do not generally see development goals in the way that the Western world, particularly the US government, see should be the development goals.
Well, from the original mission, and from a diplomatic point of view, um, did you feel that you were building, call it soft power, smart power, diplomatic connections, if you will, societal connections with your beneficiaries? I mean, were they developing a view of the United States and of USAID that they would carry forward and incorporate in their community?
Soft power is an often used point, and I hesitate to say that because in saying power, we assume our role, a role for ourselves, and we assume a role for them. I would say that building trust and relationship is critical for working with anyone, even within your own team, right? So, and that need is magnified when you are working across cultures, across border, halfway around the world. So for me, yes, that dedication and effort to building trust and relationship is necessary to collaborate. I would not expect that a top-down dictation of what people should do for you for your benefit would be an effective way to go, regardless of who you work with. Based on my program that I work with, let me share with you some perspective on what are some of the benefits that we can have. So we work with indigenous communities, for example, in the islands, who manages the land in the islands north of Panama. And that's actually a very well-known tourist spot, San Blas, or currently called Gunayala. Many Americans go there for vacation. So when you build an understanding and a relationship with the community, it enables the community to better accept and understand American tourists. They know they better know our standards. We support the development of infrastructure for tourism to build their economy. They can deliver the services as Americans would expect. And also, one thing that's really critical that people don't think about is the understanding, for example, of food safety standards. We recently hear cases of alcohol poisoning because people don't know the difference between methanol and ethanol. So there are many benefits, indirect benefits, in better socializing American value and American culture with local culture. Now, at the higher level, in response to many of the national interests of the US government, the communities, the indigenous communities that we work with, also have experienced extensive problems brought on by migrants that migrate through Central America northward to the US. And their problems include migrants that have not only damaged their land, but also polluted it. So, in many of the communities where children used to swim and the community draw water for drinking and use, have now been contaminated with gasoline and diesel. And so the community as a whole now has to buy bottled water and import it for the community. You can imagine how much that would cost the community to do that. And so some of the efforts that were just discussing with the communities is how can we support them to stem migration, to respond to contamination, and to respond to the social impact, which includes gender based violence brought on by the migrants, but also the fueling or the impetus for children to stop going to school, but instead start building illicit economies around producing services and goods to migrants that crosses their lands. So there are just so many connections on how local communities can help us in monitoring and responding to global issues and our own interests, starting with tourism and retirement residences globally, that I think it's a loss if we do not continue to cultivate and build on those relationships.
Your description of this reminds me of the Peace Corps, John F. Kennedy's Peace Corps. Can you compare the two organizations?
I think the Peace Corps, for many USAID colleagues, come from the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps is essentially a first step, in my opinion. Don't quote me on that. In my opinion, colleagues first experience their exposure to local community and different cultures when they are in the Peace Corps, when they go to be on the ground and live with the communities. And they provide services and bring in somewhat limited, and I'll explain that a little bit, resources to the community on their back and start with the relationship building. USAID works on a slightly bigger scale. Um, Most of our programs affect the broader community as a whole. So, for example, provision of healthcare services to the community as a whole, which individual Peace Corps colleagues would not be able to do, for example. And then in some countries, USAID also build programs for the nation as a whole. So the scale is very much larger, and it would require coordination, not just with host governments, but also with many actors. Because in many cases, our programs address multiple issues at multiple levels, and it's not something that individual person can do or individual teams can do from DC. You really need a structure of colleagues who understand the local situation, who can connect to different infrastructure locally to collaborate to achieve the impact that we are seeking.
Well, it takes a special kind of person, doesn't it, to be in the Peace Corps, to be in USAID, someone who's interested in in extending the values of the United States into other places and helping people and helping the world. I mean, it's a special, uh, a special contribution to the world. Am I right? And if you look around the USAID workforce, you will find most people are like that. Am I right?
Yes, I would say that most of USA colleagues are at USA not for USA, but for the mission that USA has. They work to support our partners. They work to achieve impact. They are not there just because of a career or a paycheck. Because in many cases, the duties that we have uh, far exceeds what our job description calls for. And also because we work globally, the times and the responsibility that the time scale at which we need to respond to things uh, detract a lot from our family and our own personal interests that we need to make sacrifices for. Um, and as you know, I work here in Washington. I live here. I mean Hawaii, but I do try to match Washington time. And multiple times I have calls at 3, 4 a.m. just so that I can connect with colleagues and Congress and the White House as needed. But also, on the other hand, I also need to manage time zones in Africa and in Asia, just so that when things that are important, we can keep up to date. Um, and I do want to say too, highlight my appreciation for colleagues who work on issues much more urgent and pressing than mine. At least for me, I have a system of indigenous community and governance to rely on. For colleagues who work on humanitarian assistance and in war zones, they essentially have to build the network, the capacity, and be responsive on the minute for everything by themselves. So when we have, for example, an Ebola outbreak, they have to be online right away, regardless of time and location. When we've got a disaster, a storm surge, you know. So yes, I do want to highlight that USAID, many of us, if not most or all, we work for the impact. We work on behalf of the US government as directed by Congress, and we work hard to steward US taxpayer dollars so that we can deliver the most services and impact for the US government.
What an extraordinary gift from the United States. I'm emotionally affected. So you got fired, and the DOGE organization, whatever exactly that is, terminated USAID's operations and funding, workforce, and the like, and you were caught up in that for sure. Tell us what happened. What happened to USAID? What happened to you? What happened to your colleagues, your funding, your beneficiaries, and how this came across your desk, so to speak. How it happened then, how it happened since. I just want to let you roam free to discuss what happened. Tell us the story, Vi.
Great, thank you. And I will give you specifically from my perspective because USAID is a big agency and different colleagues and different operating units were affected differently. For me, life was normal before January 20th. We knew that the second President Trump administration was coming in, and we were preparing for the new administration as we have done for previous administrations. Every new administration comes in with a new mandate and does implement steps in reviewing programming to see compliance. And so we were aware and we started to uh, prepare briefings and documents in support of how we can better achieve the new President Trump's agenda once the administration come in. Um, However, as of January 20th, uh, the president issued the executive order recalling all efforts on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And so we took a couple weeks to, within the team and within the agency, better align and analyze our programs, align our objectives, and explore opportunities to better adapt to be responsive to the new directives. However, we did not really receive much guidance from the administration. Even for the first 2 3 weeks, there were rumored to be six new political staff that had joined the agency, and none of us had received any parameters for such as what does it mean if we can't work on accessibility? What does it mean if inclusion is not acceptable? How would that play out through our programs? How do we respond to that? So we really had no direct guidance from the new political appointees. And then suddenly we started getting reports about administrative leave, people put placed on administrative leave. And the first wave of administrative leave people were the leadership, the deputy assistant administrators. They were all put on administrative leave all at once within the hour. So there were no understanding of what had happened and what we should do in response to that. So then our next level of management, lower management, stepped up as acting and tried to maintain momentum and stability for everyone. And then on January 27th, the issue of pause to programming started going out. For USAID, we have thousands and thousands of programs, so it did not go out all at once, but in waves. Uh, Several hundred programs were put on pause for analysis, and we did not know why. And at the same time, there were also discussions about a waiver process, um, but we also did not know the parameters around the waiver process. There were rumors that it has to be in direct effect to American lives in order for it to be accepted. Um, and so the bar was set extremely high, as you can imagine, because we are working across so many of the issues on the ground do not necessarily have Americans yet being affected. So the initial waves of programs that were submitted for the waiver process were essentially healthcare programs that deliver services that may have included Americans. Um, and then suddenly my access to the computer system was shut off. Um, on February uh, 2nd, I just completely lost access to the computer system. I could not do my job. I frantically sent an email to my contracting officer explaining the situation, and they said they do not know why. Also, I have lost access to the computer system. Even our computer technology department did not know why we were locked out, but I wasn't the only one. There were hundreds of contractors that were also locked out. So for that next week, I could not do any work. I could not respond to email or my partner's questions. And then suddenly, I think at the same time, then there started to be court cases filed against the DOGE, which is the Department of Government Efficiency, about the illegal shutdown of the computer systems, illegal firing of partners. So I do not know exactly what prompted it, but I was able to receive back my computer access a week after that. And at that time, we already have a build up of partners not being paid. So as soon as the pulse order went out, no payments were made to our partners. Unfortunately, that wasn't just about work that has proceeded beyond January. That was including payments for back pay, which means some of the partners, including my own, have had 6 months of back pay that they have not received. Even though, as the program manager, I had approved it, I have inspected the work that they have done and approved the payment, everything was frozen. And it wasn't just a directive in frozen. By mid-February, we learned that our procurement officers, our contracting officers, as well as our finance officers were locked out of the program management software system, as well as the finance management system. So essentially, uh, the agency as a whole was barred from accessing our computer systems to do our work. Um, and then building on that, I received a notice for termination of my contract uh, in February 19th. And because of the terms in my contract, which, as I mentioned to you, is a year to year renewal, there's a 15 days of notice. So as of March 5th, I was officially terminated from USAID. But that has not played out the way that it should. Uh, since that termination notice, and despite having passed the March 5th, my termination date, there has been no follow up instructions on how to close out my account, how to send back government provided equipment, um, how the residual pay will be follow up on. Essentially, my contracting officer and the finance people have been on leave since then, and I understand likely through to April before they are terminated through the reduction in force process. So as of now, really since the end of January, there's been no clarity about what's happening, how programs will be wrapped up. Some of them have received termination notice. Some of them have received termination notice and cancellation of termination notice, but they still haven't been paid. So it's not clear what is expected of them. On the domestic side, for the staffing, I can't say that I'm clear about my role and responsibility other than the fact that I'm technically officially away, fired from USAID, but it's not clear if there's a handover process for what I was doing. For the program I was managing, there was no clear process for officially ending the job, which includes briefing on for some colleagues who may manage sensitive information and classify information, for example. So there's still a lot of things that are unknown, and it's not clear who will be responsible for it if everybody involved is gone and the agency is no more. Uh, uh, I think the website for USAID doesn't exist anymore outside of a brief notice. Yeah, I don't know where we will go from here, particularly with the court cases determining many of the actions have been illegal. So I regret that I can't provide more answer to you at this point.
You describe a situation of complete chaos, and I wonder, when this started and all these instructions and non-instructions were strewn around the agency, it could not have functioned properly. Is there any function left? Is there anything happening now for USAID? Is there any benefits being rendered to your beneficiaries and partners?
There, as you said, there are rumors that certain colleagues are brought back, and there are rumors that certain payments are made. Um, but I have not seen within my circle of awareness, I have not seen anything that actually had happened. And I have indirectly uh, have contact with colleagues that I've worked with, and nobody knows, nobody is aware. For example, there is the court ruling that probationary officers needs to be brought back and that their termination was illegal. But my question is, okay, they may be back to the agency, but what are they going to do? If the program management software nobody can access, if the finance payment software nobody can access, then what are they going to do?
What kind of reactions have you heard from the beneficiaries and partners? What are their feelings about this sudden stop of activity, of services, of operations by USAID? What do they say? How do they feel? And we've had a lot of reports in the press about people really being upset, beneficiaries all around the country, the world, and and saying you can't trust the United States. And I wonder if you've heard any of that, if you've had conversations or communications with your former beneficiaries and partners.
I do not want to put words in their mouth, so I will start with my own perception. I honestly say that as a contractor for USAID, as part of the US government, I'm not sure I trust the US governments anymore. Because in one broad stroke, over the span of a few days, the message I've received from the US government is we will not respect our legal obligations. We will not respect our contractual obligations. And in fact, we will destroy all the records and all the personnel involved so that you would not have anyone else to talk to about this, including seeking information online by taking down all information relevant to the agency you're working with, to the people you're working with, and the program that you're involved in. For my partners, I hate to say it, but their overriding consideration is actually fear because they don't want to speak out They don't want to stick out so that they are uh, um, examined and inspected further by the US government, regardless of their disappointment, regardless of the fact that they haven't been paid for 6 months of work and is technically required to sit for another 3 months to wait to see if the US government would be kind enough to turn around and pay them for their work. They have more important issues to move on to. They need to find food for their family. They need to find new jobs. They need to respond to their own responsibilities in healthcare and in life. They can't afford to sit around and wait for the US government to decide if we happen to want to continue to work with them or not. And I do grieve with them for the loss in the potential, in the momentum that we had, in the trust that we've built, the relationship that we've built, and all the activities that we have achieved together. Um, of a personal relationship, I last August, I went on site visit to the program and I met with Indigenous women who were so excited that they had just had resources to start reforesting lots of land, as in plots of land that had been deforested by illegal actors. And they were so proud that they would have the opportunity to replant traditional crops, indigenous plants, so that they can better reestablish the ecosystem in pursuit of ecotourism, in pursuit of livelihood, and to strengthen their cultural and lingual practices because they can use the plants that are traditional to them and local to the community. And we were just discussing how we can support those efforts. I mean, helping them to find resources to plant seeds, helping them to buy fertilizers, to tend to their crops. Those are not big investments at all. They are tens of dollars uh, that they need, that would help them. Um, but overnight, everything just disappears. And honestly, I have not been investigating. I haven't had the courage to investigate how they and their family are faring. And on a personal note, uh, on that trip too, we found out that one of the indigenous leaders that we were working with had just died of a heart attack when working with us. Like he was at a meeting discussing policy and strategy, and he just dropped over dead. And we had met with his widow and 3 children. And at the time, we took donations from our staff, our own team that was there to buy them food, like bags of rice and produce and canned food for them for their immediate need. And I honestly shudder to think, what would happen to that family now that their main source of income is gone.
I'm reminded of an old poem, Vi. It's about Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty was building a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And my question to you is, what would it take to put USAID back together again? Because right now it sounds like it's flattened in every way. What would it take? And would you go back, if at all?
I think now you're getting me emotional. I think the worst part or the best part of USAID that cannot be put together is the sentiment behind our logo from the American people. That logo does not speak to charity, it speaks to collaboration and partnership. And I don't know how long it will take to rebuild that trust.
Mm.
And I think as Hawaiian residents, we know how hard it is for Native Hawaiians to process the takeover of the islands by the U.S. government. And once that hostility has been implemented and that trust and relationship is lost, I do not know what it would take to rebuild that.
Okay, I'm with you and wondering the same things. Where would you go from here, Vi? Do you have claims? Do you have unpaid compensation? Do you have loose ends that you have to resolve with USAID? Are you looking for a job? What kind of a job are you looking for? Will you go back into your area of expertise with your Ph.D.? Um, what will you do? And what mark does all of this leave on your life?
I've always told my family that USAID opened me to the world, to reality of humanity. Because before I was a scientist, I work with animals. Every day I put on a lab coat, I go into the basement lab, and I come out. Um, and my perception is that science is science, and reality, data is reality. Um, but USAID, my colleagues show me that it's not just about the sciences. It's about governance. It's about democracy. It's about human rights, and it's also about diplomacy. It's about communication. Um, because even in the U.S. during the COVID years, I'm sure you remember, um, there is a significant uh, amount of people around the world that do not believe in COVID as a virus. So it's not just about the science, it's not just about the reality, it's about how we build relationship, how we establish trust and collaboration with each other as human beings. And also, in a way, working with USAID also broke something inside of me because I could see how reality and truth and data could be dominated and overwritten if the human mind wants to do so. So, in a way, it really brought me down to earth about the limitations of science and reality. Um, as for my future, I'm doing a two-pronged approach. I'm hoping that I will have more opportunities to collaborate with the organization, PEJ, Project Expedite Justice, to support um, Native Hawaiian organizations and activists to help them better organize themselves, to help them better connect with global activists who are also indigenous people so that they can fight for their rights, particularly now that that platform of support that I was so privileged to have had is no more. So we should work together to find what are the other opportunities. On the other hand, I am looking back at my science and technical background, um, and maybe I can contribute to the state of Hawaii in terms of either I studied extensively on virology, so maybe managing epidemiology, microbiology, and scientific research. I'm open to any opportunity that may come my way.
Well, Vi, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you one last question. We'll put this discussion, and we are very appreciative that you have shared your story with us. It's very touching. We'll put this on the internet, and people will watch it, and they will have an experience perhaps they haven't had before, in the sense that there's not a lot of people like you, people who have been terminated from USAID, who have told them what it was like on the ground, and you have. So my question is, what would you say to those people? What would you like them to take away from this discussion? How should they feel about these events and about the people or the professionals that you've dealt with, the beneficiaries that you've helped? What should they be thinking?
I think my key message is to encourage, and this dates back to my scientific background. Uh, I would encourage everyone to be more open-minded and do their own research and learn more about each other before making decisions and drawing conclusions. For USAID, I regret that the public sentiment that was mobilized to shut us down is that USAID was an illegal criminal organization. We are not. 95% of our budget of the line of work that we do were earmarked by Congress. We report to them every year on everything. And USAID has, I believe, up to 10 audits last year from OIG for our expenditures, how we use our money. Everything that we have done was guided by the US Congress, by repeated administrations in the White House, and guided by our mission, which is to build, support development globally and on behalf of the US American people. And I am very disappointed when I hear from colleagues or other people that do not understand that we don't just have a blank check from Congress that we randomly use for things that we want. We work to achieve very specific goals for the US government, and that goal and that vision was established by President Kennedy 60 years ago and repeatedly confirmed by Congress since and administration since. And I regret that all that reputation and effort have been destroyed um, overnight.
Well, thank you, Vi. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, but also thank you for your service to your beneficiaries and partners in USAID and to the people of the United States. Thank you for your service to the country.
Thank you, Jay, for your time.
I'm Jay Fidell, host of Transitional Justice. We've been discussing USAID from the ground up. Thanks to our viewers for watching. We'll see you again soon for the next one. Aloha.
Aloha.